We're joined today by Oren Zaslanksy, CEO of Flock Freight. And so why don't you just real quick tell me and then tell our listeners that don't know, like what Flock Freight does, and where your place is in the marketplace.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for having me. What we do is a little bit tricky. So what I like to first do is give people sort of the context of the landscape. So if I ask you and your listeners to imagine what the belly of the beast of like a UPS or FedEx would look like, everyone's imagination is pretty accurate. If you're picturing like big trucks and little trucks and warehouses and terminals and forklifts and people, obviously, and aircraft, like some version of that is kind of like FedEx, UPS, if that's what you're imagining, and that's pretty accurate. The LTL industry, or the less than truckload industry, looks just like that without the aircraft. So that's typically a pretty big aha, where it's what we'd call very high CapEx and very high OpEx, meaning a large LTL carrier or trucking firm operates a massive hub and spoke network. Again, looks a lot like,
right.
But without the jets. Like hundreds of these terminals nationally. So if you're a manufacturer and you make tables and you've sold it to a Costco, you're in LA, you've sold it to a Costco in Chicago, you're going to load the tables you've manufactured onto pallets. That's kind of the normal unit of movement within the LTL industry. A typical pallet, everybody's seen them before, are typically 4 feet by 4 feet, so 4 by 4. And you've got 4 pallets to ship from LA to Chicago. Excuse me. That's going to move through the LTL industry. And the reason for that is it's kind of too big for FedEx, UPS, and too small to fill up what we call a truckload. So the big trucks on the highway, the 53-foot trailers, they can accommodate 26 pallets in those trailers. That would be a full load. You would typically give like a letter or a box, a parcel, to someone like a UPS or FedEx. So you're in this sort of no man's land with your 2 pallets, 8 pallets, 6 pallets. What would you do with it? You'd ship it via LTL. LTL is a big industry in and of itself. It's about $65 billion a year, every year in the US alone. All of freight is thought to be about $1 trillion in the US. So these are really, really big spaces. Right. LTL is quintessentially of high price and low quality. And what high price means is if you had 26 pallets and you could fill up a big truck, you would do that. And we'll make up numbers, just pretend that you would spend $26 to move 26 pallets. It's a made up number, obviously, but we can infer from that you'd be paying about $1 per pallet to get those pallets moved. But what would I do if I only had 1 pallet to ship? It wouldn't make sense for me to ship it via truckload. I'd pay $26.
Right.
Because that says, hey man, you're buying the whole truck either way. It doesn't really matter to me. You're going to pay $26 for 1 pallet or 26 pallets. If I have 1 pallet to ship, I'm going to go to the LTL industry, those hub and spoke operators with all those terminals. I'm going to ask them to move my freight for me. They're going to charge you about $2.50 to move that 1 pallet. So, $2.50 is better than $26, certainly, but I'd rather pay $1 a pallet if I could.
Right.
That's what Flock Freight does. We, using really, really sophisticated algorithms and what we call solvers, we create carpools of LTL freight. Another way of thinking of it is we've launched what we call shared truckload product, where you take the big 53-foot trailer, the big truck, the full truckload guy, and we go to our customers and say, we'll sell you a portion of that. If you've got 4 pallets, that's great. Give us the 4 pallets. And instead of your freight moving through this hub and spoke and being susceptible to damage and loss and theft, much longer transit times, relatively low pickup and delivery performance because of the complexity involved in that hub and spoke. To ship from LA to Chicago, it might go through 5 terminals versus the truck that just picks up, drives straight there and delivers. Well, what if all of your freight, whether you had 1 pallet all the way up to 26 pallets, could ship via the truckload industry, or mode, as we call it? That's what we do. We create algorithmic carpools. So we've invented technology. It's mind-bogglingly complicated. I can give you an example. It seems simple, right?
Please do.
Just put some freight with other people's freight. You got a robot that does it. I'll give you the example of Uber Pool or Lyft Line. As consumers, we've got Uber on our phone, most of us, and you can now get a carpool from them. And the reason you would do it is it's less expensive, ostensibly, and it's better than taking a bus, would be the other side of the value prop that they would give you. From an algorithmic constraint, a constraint means reducing what we call the search space, meaning you don't want to do a carpool with your buddy if you live in if you live in Indianapolis and I live in San Diego, we're probably not compatible carpool, right? Like
That makes sense. Yeah.
Indianapolis, I need to find somebody in San Diego. Well, you can imagine the same is true for freight. So when you have these algorithms, we may both be customers of Uber. And so we're both in their data set, but they have to constrain it to say, don't match a pickup in Indianapolis with a pickup in San Diego. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
We have to do the same thing with freight, right? So from a constraints perspective at Uber, Uber doesn't have to consider, and now Uber's in freight, by the way. I'm not talking about Uber Freight. I'm just talking about regular old. Right. Uber does not have to consider our gender. They don't have to consider our height and weight. They don't have to consider our hair color, eye color. They don't have to consider our race or religious beliefs. They don't have to consider any of those things, right? They don't have to consider if we sit in the front seat nor back seat. They don't have to consider if I get in the right or left side of the car. And they don't even have to consider if I get in on this side of the road or the other side of the road. All Uber has to mathematically constrain or consider is how many stops are there between where I am and where I'm going, and like roughly how long it's going to take, because they know that I'm not going to sit in the car for 2 hours to travel a mile.
Right. Like it's an easier problem.
It's a much easier problem.
Absolutely.
We have to consider the length, width, height, weight, density, what's called commodity codes, the class of the freight, which is like a density calculation for the LTL industry. We have to consider the valuation of the shipment. We have to consider if the pallet can be turned or stacked. We also have to then consider the sequencing in the trailer. So we have to do what's called LIFO sequencing, last in, first out. So you can imagine, standard trailer on the highway, it's all walls. There's no way in or out on the sides. The only way to get in or out the trailer is on the back, on the tail. So if you're the first thing that goes into the trailer, you're the last thing that's going to come off. If you're the last thing that's on the trailer, you're the first thing that's going to come off. So we have to do the computation of routing optimization and all the different widgets inside the trailer, coupled with a sequencing optimization of the order it's in the trailer and what that then does to routing. It's incredibly complex. I have actually spoken to people at Uber proper, who've worked in their carpooling optimization and data science and routing. Many people, I mean, it's part of what I do. And they've all said to me like, holy crap, this is infinitely more complicated than what we've had to work on. And what they've worked on is infinitely more complicated than anything that's been worked on before. So
right. I'm sure it's a problem that they're trying to figure out as well.
Yes and no. Everybody wants your solvers to run faster, and you want a more efficient yield. You want to get the best possible version of how to put these carpools together. But inherently, Uber is never really going to have to think about humans as being sufficiently different than freight. At the end of the day, your gender doesn't matter, right? Your height and weight doesn't matter. So we've simply taken on a much more complex problem. That's the bad news. What we're doing is incredibly hard, but I would tell you it's also the good news because it's defensible. We've truly invented technology. We've invented capability that's never been done before. We know this. We don't think this. We know this because when you go to file patents, the USTPO tells you like, oh, wow, we haven't seen that before. Okay, we'll give you patent protection for this. We're constraining these algorithms in ways that have just never been done before. But again, the good news is it gives us a competitive advantage. Nobody else can do it. We're the only ones who can.
Right. And so then, I mean, and you're not actually like, Flock Freight doesn't have like your own internal like carriers or like trucking network, right? So you're partnering with established carriers. Is that right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay. And so I just imagine like if because you're operating, you don't have any constrictions on like where you operate geographically in the US, I imagine, correct? And so like,
yeah, we can do business anywhere. We can do business anywhere globally, and we will over time. Right. But every given startup to a certain degree is like timing and sequencing, right? Like you can't be all things to all people, right? We know
absolutely.
This. Apple has more cash than like everybody in the world put together, but they can't do more than 3 things at once, right? They work on an iPhone, they work on an iPad, they work on a computer, and that's it. They'll be talking about maybe they're doing a car, maybe they're doing a TV, right. But you got to focus. So in our case, we will eventually be everywhere. We believe that. But when you're building a carpooling model, it's about focusing liquidity into like clusters and lanes. Back right. to the Indianapolis and San Diego problem. We don't want to have a pickup in San Diego with a pickup in Indianapolis. So instead you choose and you're like, well, I could focus on acquiring a bunch of customers in Indianapolis, or I could focus on acquiring a bunch of customers in San Diego. Either one is a totally viable strategy, knowing that in the long run, I will do both. But in the beginning, I'm going to choose. We launched our first, what we call origin city or origin market, as Southern California.
Okay.
We're in Southern Cal, so it was close. If we wanted to go see a customer, we could do it. And it's a huge market. It's driven both by Southern California manufacturing as well as import exports to Asia. So it's just a very big market.
Well, and I brought that up just because I was thinking that it has to be a pretty large challenge of getting that care. Not only do you need to solve the technology problem of figuring it out, but then you got to solve just the business problem of establishing a carrier network, right?
You're exactly right. So what is so hard about what we do is it's nearly equal parts challenging in its technical requirements as well as business requirements. So to your point, we touched a little bit on the technical requirements, which we work on feverishly, and they're brutally hard. But the business requirements are hard too. And it's both supply and demand, right? You have to, demand is the shipper, is our customer. We have to acquire those customers in geographic clusters, and we have to attempt to do what we call demand shaping. You don't want a customer in LA shipping to Florida, Chicago, and Seattle like every day in a fan. Ideally, they'd all be in LA, all shipping to Dallas. I mean, it doesn't actually work that way.
Of course.
But you build all that density along that route, carpools would be easier. And then you have to work on the supply side of the marketplace as well. And you've got to get those carriers on board simultaneously.
Right. You have to sell both sides.
You got to sell both sides simultaneously while you're also working on the technical requirements. And then you have to get it to all kind of coalesce in roughly with parity. I mean, there's never like really parity. One is always surging ahead of the other. You've got greater supply side capacity,
right,
or greater demand side capacity, or we have greater technological capability. And it's like these three balls that we're just.
So like, tell me a bit about like how I built this kind of situation. I mean, because like you had to have had quite a path of developing like the technology. How long have you guys been working on this? How long have you been like out in the market? Just give me a little bit more of a background, like a timeline.
Yeah, I was working on some of the peripheral technology around the core optimization engine in 2013, 2014. And then in 2014 and 2015, raised a little bit of angel money, my own money, and a couple of really good friends and mentors' money. And then we pulled together an engineering team, mathematicians and database guys, to build the first MVP solver or algorithm in the middle of it. So we spent 3 years building technology before we went to market to a customer and said, hey, will you come on board and allow us to try to carpool your freight? And the commercial launch was 4.5 years ago, right? So it's about call it 7 years of working on tech. 7 years of working on tech and about 4.5 years of building a business, with customers, employees, and all the things that every business has.
Right. So you guys are well established, and the logistics landscape is like always moving and changing so frequently that you could just, it's hard to know sometimes how long someone's been around. I've talked with some people and you talk with them for like an hour about technology, and then you're like, so like what markets are you in? They're like, we haven't launched. And so you always have to ask, like a little bit on the background. But so I know you say you got that angel investment, but I saw, I was doing a little bit of background on you guys, that you closed some more funding this past spring, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've raised like 7 rounds, and
wow,
everybody who's raised
you're a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, some of those rounds none are easy, but some felt great, and some were pretty torturous, and everything in between, right? Like there's high highs and low lows.
I think at the end of it, you lose a year or two off your life just in stress numbers, regardless.
I feel like dog years. Yeah, our last round, I think we press released it in the spring, but we closed it basically New Year's Eve of 2019. So 7 months ago, we closed our Series B, and that was the first time we press released any of our fundraising. And the reason for that is, although we had raised several rounds prior, is that we really do have an invention, and we've been working on it already for 5 or 6 years at that point, six years at that point. But you're always, there's an expression from Larry Fink, positive paranoia, so I don't want to be like paranoid in a way that's crippling and holds me back from being the best version of myself. But like positive paranoia is like, hey, I got this, but I'm still looking over my shoulder and just making sure I really do got this. And somebody doesn't come I'm so overconfident. So we've got LTL to ourselves in this sort of venture-backed freight tech, thing that's been happening for the last 5 to 10 years, of which we're one of, certainly not the only. We're the only ones playing in LTL and partial truckload. We're the only ones in shared truckload. We invented shared truckload, quite frankly. So we're the only ones doing it. But I always have positive paranoia. So we were in stealth mode for 3.5 years. We were actually called Optics, AUPTIX, before
Okay.
we rebranded and changed the name a year ago as kind of part of our coming out. I mean, I came up with the name Optics. I liked it. It sort of meant to be a play on optimization, or OpD for short. We changed instead of OPTI, I changed it to AU, which is a nod toward automation, that we would use automation, meaning algorithms, in order to optimize. And then we threw an X on the end, so it was AUPTIX. It was meant to sound like OPTICS, meaning like we could see things no one else saw. So it was the idea of like we use automation to drive an optimization that only we can see. And
Right.
I think all that's true, and I felt pretty proud of myself at 11 o'clock at night on my iPad when I went to GoDaddy.com and I registered optics.com.
I can see it. I can see you sitting there.
I told my wife, look, I got it. This is crazy. I'm going to take this company public. She's just like, oh my God, what's wrong with you?
Did she see it at the moment though? I feel like every idea I bring up to my wife, she's like, that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, this is my third business that I've started. So I think on some level, she's like, you're going to do this again, aren't you? And I'm like, yes, I am. But this one's going to be really cool. She's like, you said that about the last one. So
she's also a glutton for punishment.
She is. Yeah, we've been married for 24 years. So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you. She knows what she got herself into, I would argue. So yeah, we decided to exit stealth mode. It was time to kind of have our coming out party. And so we hadn't invested much in marketing. We were almost exclusively a sales driven organization, kind of head low, making direct dials to manufacturers. It was time to get on the web. So brought in a lot of marketing resources and team, and the decision was made to change to flock freight. The idea of flocking, kind of harkens a flock of fish or a flock of birds. And if you think about it, that's what we're doing with freight. We're flocking this freight together. And I think there's also, I at least like the idea of, the flock is more efficient moving together, like fish and flock together because they're better together than they are on their own. And I'd like to think we like to have fun with it. We call ourselves the flockers. And we feel like we're better together as a team. And then we also feel like our customers are better with each other, and that, as a community, we're better and we're stronger and more efficient. So,
No, I like that name. I like the name Flock Freight. I think you made a good call.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good choice. So, all right. So you guys closed this funding. It wasn't actually in the spring. It was beginning of the year, but then you had a couple of months, of peace, and then COVID hit. So, we can't get through a conversation without at least bringing it up once. And so tell me about how COVID's impacted you, how it's impacted your business, how you've reacted to it.
Yeah. So first, I just got to say, I couldn't be more proud of our team. It's scary, right? Like, let's not kid ourselves. And I think it's okay to say it. There's a tremendous amount of ambiguity. There's been both a loss of life and a loss of jobs and income. There's just tremendous uncertainty. We're in San Diego, California. The state was doing really well in terms of our numbers right up until we weren't, so they started opening up and we were kind of getting a lot of privileges and freedoms back. And then, a couple of weeks ago, we took a big step back. They've announced our kids' schools won't be open in the fall. So, it's been a lot to deal with. We have varying degrees of experience on our team. We've got some people that have seen a lot and they're, they can take it in stride. We have others that this is their first like real crisis that they're going through. And 19 weeks ago, 93 business days ago, we went to work from home early to mid-March. It's a Friday afternoon. I told everybody we're going to start working from home on Monday. And it was early, really, in San Diego. We really bought into the flatten the curve. Like, let's try to do our part. Like, a lot of people are going to get sick here, but let's try to flatten the curve and prevent the medical professionals from being overwhelmed. Let's go to work from home.
Were you prepped for that? Like, to be able to like transition quickly to being remote?
Yeah, that part was easy for us. One of the benefits to being a tech company are small things. Like, everything here is on a laptop. We don't have any local infrastructure. All the compute use on the cloud. It was literally like, take your laptop home, take your cell phone, grab a monitor if you want. That was pretty straightforward. I was just worried about the culture, not that they wouldn't work hard, just like it's scary. I mean, it was scary for everyone, and particularly, again, I've had the privilege of leading businesses through tough times already in my career. But for a lot of folks, this was really their first rodeo. They hadn't seen anything like this. A lot of people would say to me like, oh, this one's different. You haven't seen anything like this before. And I would say, well, yes, I have not seen a global pandemic before, but I have a lot of pattern recognition for ambiguity and professional stress. A lot of pattern recognition for having to be very decisive, move very quickly, and make big decisions. That was not me at all. So, first thing we did, start building our contingency plans. What happens if revenue's down a little? What happens if it's down a lot? We actually didn't build any models for up, at least not more than up fractionally. And the first week from home, the entire leadership team, we would talk 50 times a day. We'd start talking at 5 a.m. We'd have our last call at 10 p.m., every night. And it was just checking in, like, how's the team doing? What's breaking? What's not working? How are our processes? Do we have sufficient documentation? Do we have any technical problems or glitches? And we had a lot of things, but it was all like tactical. We didn't have any strategic no-goes. I can certainly say that. And by Thursday or Friday, at the end of that first week, we were like, okay, like, this is weird, but we got it. We broke a record that week. We had the biggest week in the history of the company. That first week, we worked from home, and that was important to me for setting a cultural tone. Number one is we're a venture-backed, hyperscaling tech company, and this is what I signed up for, and this is what our team signed up for, even in a pandemic. And I hope that doesn't sound cold, but we don't lose focus. I tell my team all the time, you're going to be tired. Tired is not interesting. You're going to be tired of winning or tired of losing. I know which one I choose. I want to be tired of winning. In fact, tired of winning feels better than like not tired and winning. Because if I'm not tired and I won, then it was just too easy. Like I got lucky or I took on something easy. I played Monopoly against my 8-year-old. Like that's not fun to win that. It's fun to beat an adult. That's a bigger challenge. So we want to be tired and winning. And we were, and there's been no looking back. So we try to make it fun as much as we can. We try to keep it really loud and vibrant. About half our team is like technical, involved in engineering, data science, algorithms, analytics, data in many different ways. And about half our team are like high velocity. They're on the phones, talking to shippers, talking to trucks. And it was the high velocity side I was a little more concerned about. They're used to hitting the gong and high-fiving each other, and would that still be there? So we figured out how to hit the gong. I mean, there's so many good tools now. We use Slack for all of our internal messaging. I don't know that it's worse than Teams or, there's a lot of good products out there, Google Hangouts. So we were hitting the gong virtually, and we made it loud. And I would tell the managers, for the first couple of weeks, you look into the eyes of your employee at least once a day. Like look them in the eyes, look at them in the face, and just ask, hey man, how you doing? We're not there to invade their privacy, but it's like a mental health check, And, I tell the team all the time, we are all going through this pandemic, but we are not all going through it equally. Some of us, myself included, I'm comfortable at home. I've got a comfortable homework environment. I've got my wife's been stayed at home with the kids, so she's a full-time mom. So, the kids are crawling all over me, but I can kind of like, hey, you got to take care of them. I'm working, and that's our home arrangement, and it works for us. You've got a lot of working moms and dads. The kids are home from school. It's really challenging. You've got young people sitting around a kitchen table with 3 roommates, and they're all working from home with a headset on, and that's just hard. It's distracting, like it's real life. Right?
Oh yeah.
Varying degrees of Wi-Fi connectivity. Some people, they got a high-speed line, they're cranking. Other people, nobody's dialing up anymore, right? But, they didn't buy the high speed, because they didn't need it, they don't watch Netflix, I guess. So, a lot of different work conditions, but the team has been extraordinary, and they've really bought into this idea of like, it's going to be weird, just embrace it, stop fighting it. This is macro, it's much bigger than us. And then I think they've really, we pivoted our noble purpose like week 2, very early on. If you think back 18 weeks ago, it was legitimately like, are we facing the zombie apocalypse? Like, how weird is this going to get? Like, if I can't buy toilet paper, if I can't buy food, this is pretty scary. Like, you know, you'd go to the grocery store and you'd buy like 2 or 3 weeks worth of stuff and you'd stick it in your garage storeroom or whatever. And you're buying like rice and beans and dried goods and canned goods in ways that, you know, we certainly hadn't before.
I have so many pounds of beans that we're never going to eat.
Right? Thankfully, we're not going to eat them because it didn't play out that way.
Right.
You know, it played out in a way where, yeah, you're still eating fresh fruit and veggies, but I've got those beans and rice too at home. So I told my team, look, I can't control what's going on with a global pandemic. Control what we can control. You know what we can do? We can help bring calm to our communities through the delivery of essential goods. We're essential. We work in freight. We work in the U.S. supply chain. We're going to be one of the many, many millions of unsung heroes. No one's ever going to know it. Who cares? We're going to know it. We're going to look at each other on a video call every morning at 7:30, every single day. We still do it. And we're going to know what we did. And we're going to work tirelessly around the clock to make sure that our communities have calm. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food and shelter. Let's make sure that everybody feels as best we can supported with food and shelter, and we will help do our part to stave off the zombie apocalypse. We took a lot of not just pride, but I think satisfaction, comfort that we were working with purpose, that we weren't just working to build a hyperscaling tech company with a high valuation that is headed to the public markets. You know, that's pretty cool. But rather, we were working to help our communities as defined by your own family, your local town, your city, your county, your state, your country, your planet Earth, right? Like, leave it to the user to define how they interpret community, and maybe some combination of all the above. That rather, the work that we were doing was going to be really hard, but really impactful. And we talked about it every single day, bringing calm to our communities through the delivery of essential goods. We had a bunch of t-shirts made. We're big on swag, a lot of tech companies are. So, you know, Flock Freight on the front, and on the back, it was like 4 fists all coming together in the middle with a circle. And it said, bringing calm to our communities through the delivery of essential goods, all in, which is like our slogan here. You know, we're all in on what we do. So the team has been extraordinary. And in fact, this has been a forcing function. It's been an accelerant. I would tell the team too every day, guys, I know this isn't even fair to ask, and I'm sorry, but I'm a huge believer in never waste a good crisis. So we got a massive crisis here. I didn't want it, didn't choose it, didn't predict it. I got nothing to do with it, right? But here it is, nonetheless. So I'm not going to waste it. I need us to become who we're going to be 9 months from now, right now. We're destined for this. We thought we had 9 months to grow and evolve and become this thing in the future, capable of bringing calm to our communities to deliver essential goods, capable of scaling shared truckloads, scaling this technology in ways that's never been done before. We got to do it now. I need you to do it now. Not because I'm a jerk and I'm, you know, hard charging CEO, but because it is what the world needs of us. I'm just here to help you guys unlock it. How can I help? And they stepped up, and they continue to step up every single day. And I'm marveled. I'm in awe of, I mean, I'm twice as old, you know, as the majority of this team. They're just sprinting, and they seem unbreakable to me, tireless, and they're completely committed. So COVID has been tragic and scary for all of us, for most of us.
Right, of course.
And at the same time, it has been a forcing function for us to realize a much better future state of who we are right now. And so I'm a huge believer in that idea of never waste a good crisis. Like, I actually think you have like an obligation. I mean, if you're in a crisis, do something positive with it. You know, I'm not one to sit around and feel sorry for myself. So this team has risen to the challenge. It's extraordinary, and we're forever different. We are in every way better organization, better culture, better business, triggered not because of COVID, but catalyzed by, you know,
right. Yep. And I think I think there's going to be a lot of talk years to come from now when we sit back and we say, like, because you either look at it this, like, COVID is going to pass, right? And this crisis will eventually pass. I don't know when, I don't have a crystal ball, or the world's going to just stop working, but that's not going to happen. So you just accept then that this is going to pass. And that means that at the end of the day, we're going to be left with a world of people that either adapted to the change and came out stronger on the other end. And then there's going to be a lot of companies that unfortunately aren't going to make it through this time. Right. And it's one of those periods that we're going through.
Yeah, I think in people and in an organization. And so I also think in the case of COVID, there's just a lot of very unlucky people. There are lucky,
Hmm.
there are unlucky people, and it's tragic. But that's not the whole story. I mean, there's also um, underlying goodness that was right there. It's like an iceberg. It's just right below the surface. And the crisis happened, and that iceberg rose. The team, the people, the talent, the technology rose. And unfortunately, I know it's a harsh thing to say, but I think that there's underlying badness that gets exposed as well.
I would
People,
agree. Yeah.
it's the iceberg sank. Like it was a little bit there, and they were spread too thin, overly leveraged, didn't have the right culture, they weren't sufficiently differentiated, didn't drive enough value. But again, I want to be clear. You could be the best restaurant operator in the world, the greatest hotel operator in the world. You are unlucky. Your business went to zero. And that is not goodness or badness. That is just tragic. I
Right.
mean, you can say like owning restaurants is a terrible idea or owning hotels is a bad idea. I mean, it's
No.
just incredibly unlucky. But you look at an industry like mine, like freight and supply chain, this is not a zero revenue industry or business. But some people were completely obliterated very quickly, very, very quickly. Some people have gotten through it okay because they were lean and there was some real goodness there in the culture. And I don't take credit for it, but I want to share it with you and your audience. And that's, this company has thrived way beyond anything we ever could have imagined or experienced. And again, it's not because of COVID, it's despite COVID, but COVID unlocked us. It actually was weirdly like this pandemic was a key that unlocked what was right there, this potential for a team that was just waiting for an opportunity to do great things.
That's
And
awesome.
seized it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm pinching myself although it's surreal and weird. And I share every Thursday morning in our all hands the week's unemployment data. It comes out every Wednesday night, and I shared with them there was a great pick in one of the newspapers, the total loss of jobs in the '08 recession in the United States versus like week 5 or 6 in the pandemic. In that 1 week, there was something like 5 times more unemployment claims than throughout the entire 2008 Great Recession. Like the
Wow.
velocity of the
Right.
badness is unlike anything we've seen. My personal belief, certainly my hope, but my belief is that this recovery will be much faster than the 2008 Great Recession. It was kind of
I
much
agree.
lower up. We're clearly not going to see a V-shaped recovery. Hopefully nobody had that expectation. I'm a believer in like a modified W, like down really hard, kind of up, bouncing around, and then it'll climb out. I think San Diego is a good example. When we hard shut down like most people did 15, 16 weeks ago, I mean, there were places you couldn't even walk anymore along the coast. Beaches were closed, restaurants closed, everything closed. Now, the governor re-shut us down last week, but kind of. So like restaurants are open if they have outdoor seating. So
Okay.
we're hustling out of necessity. We're not, you would think a city like San Diego would have like a lot of outdoor dining. We actually don't have a lot, but we should. So you know what they're doing? They're working with the cities. They're closing streets.
Yep.
Around it, and they're putting tables out in the middle of the street and chairs. And you know what? I want to give them my money. I want to go patronize those restaurants and sit outside and dine al fresco like a European in the middle of San Diego, because I think first of all, it's kind of ethically the right thing to do. Like I have the means of going out to dinner and I've got a
Yep.
job. So I want to put some money into the economy. And secondly, it's kind of lovely and weirdly like cathartic and communal.
Yep.
We're sitting outside and it's cool, but it's different. And we know why we're doing it. It's because we're going through a tough time as a community. So it's a way of feeling a little bit connected
Right.
as well. So, but the good news is those restaurants are open and operating. I'm sure they're not operating at the rate that they were before. I'm positive revenue and income is down, but it isn't the complete cataclysmic closure that it was for them, 3 or 4 months ago.
Right. And then hopefully what they are able to get right now is enough to hold them through until this passes. Right. So
I'm hoping, absolutely.
And it's an interesting point too of, there's some things that we've been forced into via COVID that, I mean, they might continue post where like experience has increased or improved. Right. For example, like we got a new dog going into quarantine. And
Yeah.
so at the vet's office, you literally just pulled up and someone would come out and they would get the dog and they would take them in and call you about everything that was going on and then come bring the dog back out. I'm like, this was way better than bringing my dog inside and fighting in the lobby for 30 minutes waiting for an appointment. So I wonder, like eating outside was nice. It was a nice change that I wonder how much is going to also carry over, once this is all past us. But so we're running a little low on time. I do want to ask you a couple more questions. So first, tell me real quick, what do you think is going to be the biggest driver of change in, like technology speaking, in the LTL industry, like here in the next 5 years?
Us. By a
You?
mile. Oh yeah, absolutely. By a mile. I see the hubris in that statement.
No, and you're A-okay to say the statement, but now I'm waiting for, the justification on the statement.
Yeah. So innovation, technological innovation in transportation in general, I actually think this is bigger than just LTL, but I think it's in freight, has been telemetry, right? Like location data. So there's a big wave of what's called ELDs, electronic log devices. The Department of Transportation regulated them a couple years ago. It's great. So for the first time ever, trucks have to have a gadget, piece of hardware in the truck, and it can be pinged. It's a GPS chip, tells us where the freight is. It's great. It's simplified tracking, created more safety on the highways. It's a very positive thing. There are a lot of middleware kind of software SaaS providers that are transferring this data back and forth between stakeholders. That's fantastic. We've got a wave of what are called DFMs, digital freight matching. They're kind of broker 2.0 that are connecting supply and demand. They're taking like empty truck and full load, and maybe there's an app involved or a desktop tool that's matching. I think all that stuff's great. I think it's iterative, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an iteration against what was there. It's the next logical step. I think a step function is autonomous driving vehicles. I think that's a really big deal. I think that's more than a decade out. That I follow that very closely. By the way, I am not threatened by that. I'm enabled by it. I mean, autonomous driving vehicles, we're rocking and rolling. I can't wait for that tech to come out. So,
because then, that would change your algorithm a bit too, right? Because I imagine that driving regulations are going to change along with, like, in terms of, I held a CDL for a little while in a past life, right? And so in terms of like how long you can be on the road, work hours, robots don't need to sleep.
Well, and the pain, absolutely, and sort of the pain and suffering of, how many pickups are you willing to make in a day? How many deliveries are you willing to make in a day? The robot is going to get annoyed. He's not going to be frustrated with the work schedule that we give them. So I'm very bullish on it. It's an enabler of my business. The reality, though, is, and again, this is something I'm close to and I follow, we'll see platooning, we'll see things happening on the highways, and it's a great story. But the reality of a 70-foot long, 80,000-pound tractor trailer backing down an alley, to turn and make a delivery into a grocery store, that is not happening in the next decade. So, but that's a big deal. And I do put it in the when, not if category. There's some real regulatory challenges, some safety challenges, there's some behavior challenges, like a lot of challenges there. It will happen. That's a big one. And then the other one is us, this ambition to say, effectively a disintermediation of the hub and spoke infrastructure, this idea that, things need to flow through intermediary posts, that we take it out of a terminal to another terminal to bring more things in. But instead, imagine a flock freight platform, a flock freight environment where everything's just flowing down our river of algorithms, where just whatever you've made today, stick it on a pallet and drop it into the river. And we're the river, and it'll just flow where it needs to go in a very efficient manner with guaranteed no damage, on-time pickup, on-time delivery. It's not that we're using better trucks or better truck drivers. It's that our technology allows us to completely remove this idea of this intermediary locations, all these warehouses and all these terminals, which quite frankly destroy value. They add a ton of expense. We're the only freight company that's a certified B-Corp. So B-Corp is like a sustainability and diversity program and initiative. The credential is really hard to get. When I first heard about it, I thought, well, that'd be cool. It'd be a good branding tool, and we're sincere about, the reduction of CO2 emissions, right? So if you think about all these LTL trucks running around all day, going back and forth, in and out of the terminal, With us, the truck just makes a pickup and drives, from San Diego to Indianapolis to make deliveries. The B-Corp thing was really tough to get. So we now, as a certified B-Corp, we sit alongside Patagonia. We sit alongside Tom's. I mean, these are like really passionate. I think when we first approached them and we went to them, they were like, "You're a freight company. You're the devil. You're the enemy." And we're like, "Well, wait a second here. Like, you got to contextualize everything. I mean, you want to eat? A truck had to bring you your food. So let's get the idea of like purely electrified autonomous vehicles and say that's way out in the future. You got to eat now. So it's really about best alternative. What if I could deliver you your food with 50% of the carbon emissions of the next guy? Is that pretty amazing?" And they said, "Well, yeah, that would be transformative, because again, it's $1 trillion worth of revenue, worth of, the value of the freight is actually like US GDP, right? So let's get a sense of like how big this is. So if US GDP could be delivered with half the fossil fuel emission, with half the CO2, emissions, is that pretty cool?" And the answer turned out, yes, it is. So, what we're doing, I really believe this, we're the only game in town. We're the only technology freight company that fundamentally uses our technology to change the way the freight moves, right? So everybody else is using technology to make the transaction more efficient. That's great. I'm a huge believer in that. I don't mean to disparage it at all. Less button pushing, less clicking, more streamlined. Every business is working on increasing efficiency and being more streamlined. But let's think about what we do. Without our technology, the freight moves from terminal to terminal, terminal to terminal. With our technology, it moves on a tractor trailer. Without any terminals. Our customer promise is what we call hubless, meaning without a hub, without a terminal. It is a shared truckload solution. Without my tech, there's a hub. With my tech, there's no hub. We're the only ones who can claim to do that. So we start with LTL because that's the most obvious place to create the biggest impact, the highest degree of differentiation as well as disruption. I truly believe we are the technology disruptor.
Well, you have, I believe in what you're saying. I believe in the product and the idea. Coming from a fulfillment background, I know that there's only like 4 major players that you could even deal with when it comes to like LTL, for the most part. So like you are definitely, you didn't pick a fight with small fish to go up against. But I'm excited to hear about your approach. I'm always excited to hear about efficiency and new technology coming into logistics space. We got 1 minute left. I'm going to put you in a hot spot with a hot spot question. But so what would you say is a commonly held belief in your industry that you think is completely wrong? And I know it's a hard, difficult question, but it sometimes leads to fun answers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's near and dear to what we're doing. People have talked about doing what we're doing before, carpooling LTL. And the answer is always, it can't be done. That in order to build enough volume, you're going to have to cheat. You're going to have to open up a couple terminals. You'll say you're not an LTL carrier, but you'll open up a terminal in SoCal and a terminal in the Midwest and a terminal in the Northeast. That's the only way you can do it to get enough critical mass. And we're 4.5 years commercially into this. We don't publicly talk about, revenue and run rates and all that, but we are a much bigger company than people realize. We're moving thousands and thousands of shipments every month at this point.
Wow, that's awesome.
We're not tiny, and we own and operate no vehicles. We own and operate no terminals. So a commonly held belief is the only way to move LTL is to use physical assets, warehouses, and terminals. We are proving every single day and proving to the world as we're hiring people from industry. My best day is when I hire a guy out of an LTL carrier and they came here because they believe in what we're doing. They worked in the belly of the beast, these massive behemoths, to your point, multi-billion publicly traded companies, and they come to little old us and they say, I believe in what you're doing. It's going to be really hard, but the promise to the customer, the promise to the world is significant. So the commonly held belief is that this can't be done without physical assets. I'm telling you it can.
Beautiful. All right, Oren, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Everybody can, the URL will be right here, right down below the screen right now, thanks to editing magic. And everyone, go and check out Flock Freight. If you are actually here, or you give the pitch. You give your 30-second pitch real quick.
Yeah, flockfreight.com. Easy enough. If you want to drop me a line, please do. My email address, oren@flockfreight.com. Love to hear from you. Google us. We're everywhere. Google search shared truckload, and you'll see nothing but us on there. We're really proud of the work that we're doing, innovating this category.
Awesome. Oren, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was great talking with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to meet you.